Welcome back. Today I am sharing the third part of my conversation with Shyam Sankar during a Q2 earnings report callback that I was offered to ask questions and subsequently share the answers with the Palantir community. So today I have two final questions, one of which is around Foundry for builders and the setup there. You might not think that's important, but I assure you it is. And the last question being what Palantir is willing to say at this point for a consumer product or a more lower end business product and the TAM expansion there. Let's go. Alright, starting off with the first question here. I said one of your most recent announcements, which I was blown away with and not expecting at all at this point, was Foundry for builders. So I'm wondering if Foundry for builders requires forward deployed engineers. And huge shout out to Jake Yu for the question. I saw he put it on Say Technologies and it was not answered, and I thought it was such a great question that it definitely needed an answer. So I asked, what's the level of expertise in general required for these day zero companies, or even any startup that you've talked about using down at this lower level of a business? Can you speak to what sort of expertise is needed for that, and if FDEs, forward deployed engineers, are involved? I know you're kind of just starting on this and piloting with some alumni companies, but I'm just wondering if you could elaborate a bit more on that. Shyam said it's a great question and continued by saying the idea for Foundry for builders is that it would require zero engineers. Customers are able to get up and running in minutes. They're able to use this on their own, even while building their core offerings. And he said it's really targeted at businesses whose alternative would be a multi-year, multi-million-dollar custom build sort of project. When you're in that sort of crucial phase in the startup, time to value is everything. So if you have this propelled alignment of, if I build on top of Foundry, I can get there 2 years or so faster and save a lot of capital. I can test and learn that much quicker. This makes a lot of sense and certainly requires no additional technical skills other than any existing ones. Shyam said we're very excited to continue to develop the program and get this out into a broader audience beyond just our alumni community, and we're seeing a lot of interest in it. There's been a fair amount of inbound where people are interested in doing this, and validates the idea that you have these companies with ambition, and a big part of it for us is about ambition. And then he went on to reiterate the statement from the earnings call saying that Palantir's business is limited only by the ambition of our customers, and a lot of its R&D comes out of that inspiration in the field. It's the meta constellation, it's working on the US government's hardest problems. And there's also an analog to that and the commercial. When Palantir wants to go fast, the customers will enable that to happen. He said finding the right partners where they are, just tackling wildly ambitious problems. Since they really want to transform their industries, that's great for Palantir, and it's great for them to partner and build upon what Palantir has been working on for 15 years. So I really loved that answer. With Foundry for builders, there really are just so many network effects going on. Like the SPAC investments in the day zero companies and getting down to these startups is going to yield something huge in the future. But in case you weren't aware, I just want to define what a forward deployed engineer is. So here we are on Quora. This is someone that worked at Palantir previously. They said a forward deployed engineer is someone who works with our customers and helps with the technical aspects of a Palantir product within their organization. We like to say that 90% of Palantir is ready to go out of the box, and the other 10% is custom for each deployment. FDEs are responsible for that remaining portion, and they integrate different data sources into the Palantir platform, create custom code which will help streamline the user experience, advise the customers on the specifics of a deployment so that they can buy what is right for them, and develop the dynamic ontology. But then this person says forward deployed engineers are mainly concerned with the second point here, which is creating custom code. But we now know that Foundry for builders, the product for startups, does not require any engineering beyond Palantir's development of it. They don't need to send a forward deployed engineer to the startup, to the site, to customize any of the code. And that is extremely bullish, not just for scale, but for how confident the company is in its product, saying that it doesn't need any technical customization beyond the point at which a user in the startup, this day zero company, can go in and make the changes themselves in a low code, no code environment, I assume. So I think that is a very strong indication that Foundry for builders might very well be the next leg up for Palantir's growth story. If the piloting goes well with these alumni companies and they're able to keep trialing it out with some other companies companies before unlocking it to everyone. I think we will have to follow this, see how it develops over the next couple months, and obviously quarters, and see how long it takes. But the fact that there's no forward deployed engineer is really a good sign, so I'm happy to share that news. And finally, likely the question you've all been waiting for, I complimented the management team on how successful Foundry and Gotham have been as products. And I also said I know that both of them have so much farther to go over the next few years. But then I asked if it's too soon to talk about, think about, or speak on a consumer product or a lower level product of any kind. And this is something going off of what Tom Nash and I spoke on our interview. He said the way he sees it playing out is B2B, which we are now, B to smaller b, which is probably Foundry for Builders or maybe even something else in the future, and then B2C as the ultimate progression of the evolution of Palantir. So I asked, is that too much to read into it? Could you maybe talk about the TAM expansion? Because that wasn't something mentioned in the S1, and I know that was a fairly recently revealed document, so I'm just wondering about that. And here's Shyam once again. He said, I think we're on that journey. If you really think about Foundry for Builders, we're expanding the perimeter of Foundry to enable us to go work with medium-sized and small, and we're continuing to invest in that. And if you think about another dimension to this, and it's in terms of the ecosystems, so something like Skywise and the Airbus ecosystem with 140 airlines. Sure, some of those airlines are big, like United, but actually a lot of them are pretty small, and he mentioned one which is called Peach Airlines in Japan, and he said he believes they have 5 aircrafts. So he says Palantir has to think about the right mechanism for which to distribute Foundry to small companies as well as part of a greater stack. And there's one step beyond that. How does Palantir enable its customers to offer their customers Foundry when those customers are the airlines, for instance? He said, were we doing that when those customers are customers? Mentioning that that's just something they're in the thick of right now. And the main takeaway is what he said next, being that he thinks there is a consumer product experience through specific ecosystems that we're putting in. There's kind of a natural conclusion. We're on this journey, we're getting there, we're developing the product as we go, and building value as we go, and continue pushing for the next level. That's along the lines of what he said. So I want to know, how do you feel about that response to the question? Of course, he could not disclose to me any consumer product. He wasn't going to say, yes, we're working on something internally, we're testing it or anything like that. But again, I want to reiterate my thoughts, which is that Foundry and Gotham really have so much farther to go before their growth is maxed out. And I think Palantir should be pushing as hard as they can, firing on all cylinders for those two products before they even start to think about a consumer product. And now we saw the commercialization of Apollo, so perhaps that will be a third pillar to the growth story. But anyways, there will come a day, and many long-term investors have thought about this, with what sort of B2C product there could be. And while I did not necessarily expect any sort of commentary on that, we did get something that I thought was very insightful from Shyam. He said there is a consumer product experience through specific ecosystems that we're putting in. He mentioned Skywise. And I think that's really interesting, that the ecosystems and network effects that Palantir is developing layers their software so much that there is a consumer of their consumer, meaning that you are using Palantir software through an intermediary, which means the scope and scale of Palantir Foundry is drastically increased. So I think it's really important to think about that. In that way, he was saying consumer being someone using Foundry as a consumer of someone else. So I know that's very confusing. It doesn't probably make much sense, but I'm sure that Palantir could pivot when the time comes, when they have enough resources at their disposal to make such a judgment to invest and build out a really everyday consumer kind of product, harnessing their software prowess. So those were the 2 questions, the final part. I hope you really enjoyed it. It was amazing to be able to ask these questions of Shyam. I think both answers were as good as they can get, really. If I ever do get this opportunity again, what would you like me to ask? What questions would you ask if you had the chance? Please let me know in the comments. I want to see all of them. I will write them down. I will take notes. I want to make sure I'm accurately representing everyone here in the community. So please let me know about that. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time.